There's a lot going on. I mean, something I do want to flag, because so many people were surprised that John Galliano was announced as, this next theme for the Met exhibit. And I don't think, especially if you watch this channel, I don't think it should come as any surprise. For example, this article from The Cut came out in 2024, and we covered this 2 years ago. And I'm going to read out, I've highlighted a part on the screen I'm going to read out, just so you guys can understand why it shouldn't be surprising to anyone if you follow this channel. So it says, and this is an article written by Chantal Fernandez. Funny enough, when I was a writer at The Business of Fashion, Chantal Fernandez was my editor. So I love her. She taught me a lot of stuff that I know about writing and definitely improved me as a writer. But she essentially covered the story for The Cut. So it says, when the annual parade of celebrities ascends the steps at the Metropolitan Museum of Art on Monday night to mark the opening of Sleeping Beauty's Reawakening Fashion, guests will have no indication that the elaborate exhibition they're about to see is a last-minute backup plan. As recently as summer 2023, head curator Andrew Bolton and his patron, Vogue's Anna Wintour, intended instead to stage a show dedicated to the work of one of their favorite designers, John Galliano. His career is still marked by a series of drunken antisemitic tirades that led Dior to fire him in 2011. In the years since, with Wintour's unyielding support, he has sought public forgiveness and returned to fashion, now designing for Maison Margiela. So, of course, when this article was written, he was still at Margiela. But anyway, continuing. A monographic exhibition at the Met could have been the culmination of a comeback, but the Costume Institute's Galliano exhibition is on indefinite pause. According to sources with knowledge of the department's plans, the Metropolitan Museum's leadership feared public backlash. Some members of the museum's board are said to have stepped in to stop the show. And then in brackets it says, a representative for the Met said the museum does not comment on uninformed exhibitions. Bolton and Wintour declined to comment for this story. So, based on this information that we had from 2024, it was quite obvious that for a while, Anna Wintour has constantly been pushing for a John Galliano themed exhibit, and they finally got it. Now, what we have to ask ourselves is, after, it didn't go through in 2025, it didn't go through in 2024, what is so different about 2026, especially when you consider the cultural and political climate? There is a lot of anti-Semitism in society because, of course, what's going on in Israel and obviously what's going on in Palestine. So because of that, I find it really strange that the timing where they thought, okay, now is the time, is now. Very, very strange. Very, very strange to me. But even in a lot of the coverage for this going through, they have been talking extensively about the fact that John Galliano had to get the blessing of rabbis, and he had meetings with rabbis to see if he could actually have this exhibit and if they were okay with this, going on, for example. So that's why there's a lot of controversy around this. And I think these things are really complicated because, to be honest, there's a conversation around forgiveness and do people get a second chance? Now, me personally, I don't want to live in a world where you can't make mistakes and you can't come back from your mistakes. There are some mistakes I do think you can't really come back from, like, murder and things like really serious, like R word. You guys know what that is. Those are things that personally I think you can't come back from. But I think if in a state of, being drunk and being under the influence of drugs, you have a tendency to be nasty, I think as an adult, what you need to understand is that, okay, clearly I shouldn't be doing drugs and I need to go sober, because when I do drugs or when I drink alcohol, this is what happens. And I think what we can say about John Galliano is that over time, he has actually not been drinking. He's been sober since he was dismissed from Dior. And he has actually shown an active understanding of wanting to know better and do better. And he's, met with the rabbis, and he's literally learned about Jewish culture. He doesn't drink anymore. He doesn't do drugs. There are no, reported instances of John Galliano having these crazy moments that he did before. So I think It's quite obvious that he's not the same person. It's quite obvious he doesn't think the same. So I think at this point, I don't know what else you should do. Me personally, I'm a flawed human being as well. I think everyone is flawed. Have I made mistakes in my life? Yes. Not that bad, but I've definitely made mistakes in my life. And I think that it would be a crazy world to live in where if some of the mistakes I've made in the past, if people were aware of some of these mistakes, even though I'm just not like the way I think now at 28 years old is not the same way I used to think when I was 16. But if I was held to the standard of, a mistake I made when I was 16, do we all want to live in that world? I don't know. I personally don't want to live in that world. So obviously people think about this differently, depending who you ask. But I'd like to know what you guys' thoughts are on the whole situation. Holly says he has consulted with leaders of the Jewish community and they forgave him. What the heck else can we ask for? Moving on. Let's see what everyone else is saying. I can't wait to see how the narrative around anti-Semitism evolves over the next 10 years or so. Yeah, that is definitely changing. Imagine you yourself getting things dug up on you and being scrutinized. Yeah, that's exactly what I was alluding to, essentially. If it goes through now, they're definitely going to bring it back up, but he's really been working on himself behind the scenes. So I wish they'd leave it a bit or be ready for the media. I do believe he's working, but I'm not Jewish either. If anyone in the chat is Jewish, I'd love to know your thoughts, or even after the fact, I'd love to know your thoughts on, how you feel about John Galliano in general and how you feel about the fact that he's the focus of this exhibit. You think if he went on a racist rant back then, he'd be blacklisted the way he was over anti-Semitism? No. Well, but in society, people don't take racism as seriously as anti-Semitism. We all know this. This is not like new news or whatever. Like everyone knows that to be true. It's crazy that Kanye hasn't been awarded the same sentiment, although they kind of had the same mishap. So the difference between Kanye, though, is that Kanye has apologized, fair enough, but it's not the same as Galliano because, first of all, Galliano so when he was doing it, it was under the influence of alcohol and sometimes drugs. With Ye, I guess you can make the argument that he's bipolar. Some people believe he's not, so then what argument do you have? And then Kanye's apology wasn't really much of an apology. And then on top of that, the massive difference between Galliano and Kanye actually is that Galliano has met with the rabbis. Galliano has been sober for 10 years. Like we haven't seen, even if Kanye, apologizes, we haven't seen 10 years of, not doing the same thing or not having these crazy rants on social. We don't have that track record with Kanye the way that we do with John Galliano. So it's not actually the same, to be honest. It's really not the same. It's not the same. Okay, some people are saying, I believe Kanye is diagnosed with bipolar. Yeah, so I guess that's the one argument. But I think, yeah, it's not the same because we don't have that track record. Like, Kanye could literally turn around in 2 years and do the same thing, knowing Kanye. So until we get like a long-term track record, it's just not the same thing. So yeah, it's not the same. And then also Kanye doesn't really have Anna Wintour backing him. Because to be very honest with you, if the way that John has Anna Wintour on his corner, if Kanye had Anna Wintour on his corner, I think Kanye would have navigated fashion a lot easier. And his comeback would have been a bit more seamless, to be honest. So yeah, but anyway, moving forward. Another thing I kind of want to examine is what do we think a John Galliano Met exhibit will look like? What do we think the focus is going to be on? What do we think, what parts, what eras, what collections are they going to focus on? And I was kind of just, speculating in my head, like what are they? Are they going to show like his really scrappy London era shows? I'd like to see a lot of work from his eponymous label because a lot of people don't really talk about John Galliano's brand. What will be the weighting between things, between like Givenchy versus Dior versus Margiela versus a few things that he did at Oscar de la Renta, like what will be the balance of that? I'm just very curious on how they choose to create that, to be honest. Let me see what guys are saying. Draping and dandy. Many figures like Galliano said things sober that we can't tolerate nowadays, like Lagerfeld, but maybe it's hard to compare. I think it is hard to compare because like I was saying, Galliano, a lot of his mishaps weren't really sober though. Like there are some things that he did that were sober, but they're not as bad as like what he got fired for. So it's really not, it's not the same thing. I don't really see it as the same thing. And this is also true too. Also, Galliano doesn't have a Hail Hitler song. So yeah, I don't know why people try to compare Gallianos. I don't think it's the same thing at all, to be fair. I actually don't think it's similar. Yeah, I don't think it's similar at all. There's a reason why certain countries choose the practice of rehabilitation over total penalization. People can be changed. People do change. And it's not like we're not holding him accountable, but at the end of the day, he has held himself accountable and taken the necessary steps. I do, because even in my video where I was reviewing his documentary, I did think that a lot of his friends, like people like Naomi Campbell and stuff, they gave him a bit too much leeway, because ultimately he's still an adult and it's still his decision to do drugs. It's still his decision to drink alcohol. Like as an adult, you're supposed to know if you can't handle something, you should stop it, because people have different reactions to certain things. So I did think they were giving him too much leeway and they weren't really holding him accountable the way that he's probably held himself accountable. So I was definitely very critical of that. So yeah, I hope that they show all his eras throughout the decades. Me too. Me too, me too, me too. Uni says meeting with the rabbis is not enough. A major public apology, like we think of pro-Semitism with Galliano, is a requisite for public acceptance. Okay, you're talking about Kanye. Fair enough. Diagnose this, diagnose that, manage it and be an adult. Like, I can't speak for anyone else, but me personally, I've never been drunk in my life, and that's a choice. Like, we're adults. Like, when you're an adult, you have a choice. When you get drunk, you know, you get blackout drunk and you don't have control of your surroundings, or you know that when you drink alcohol, you get aggressive, then you need to, as an adult, decide maybe I shouldn't be drinking. And if as an adult, you don't make that decision, and then one day you drink a lot and then you punch someone and then you end up arrested, that's your fault as an adult, because you didn't take responsibility for your actions previously and realize that you shouldn't be drinking because of the response that drinking brings out of you. So that's all part of being an adult. I think people, sometimes when it does come to those things, people give too much leeway around those things. So yeah, I think balance can be given to both things. True, I've been sober for years for that very reason. It's a choice. 100% it's a choice. Look at the likings of Donatella Versace. She was a big drug addict. She could get out, and so did Galliano eventually. 100% agreed. 100% agreed. So yeah, those are my, quick thoughts on the John Galliano Met Gala, is what we're going to call it. I'm very much looking forward to it and, what's going to happen. Hopefully it's a moment to really celebrate the work of Galliano, for sure. So, yeah. And someone is saying having an addiction is not a choice, it's a disease. You can try to change, but you don't. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is not taking responsibility, because if you're addicted to cigarettes, at one point you had to choose to smoke cigarettes. So that's a choice. How is that not a choice? If you're addicted to drinking alcohol, at one point you had to choose. Like, no one opened your mouth and stuffed alcohol down your throat. Same thing with cigarettes. No one took a cigarette, put it in your mouth, and then lit it and said, I'm going to kill you if you don't smoke this cigarette. So a lot of addictions are very much avoidable. Like, we know that a lot of things, like, let's say alcohol, there's no net benefit to your health, only negatives. We know that drugs, same thing. We know that smoking, same thing. So you have all this information very much available to you. So if you decide to do it and then you get addicted to it, that you have to take responsibility for that. How can you say it's like a disease and you don't have a choice? That is crazy to me. That's the kind of thinking that makes people abusive. That's the kind of thinking that people that drink alcohol and become abusive are it's not my fault. It's not me, it's the alcohol. As an adult, there's a level of personal responsibility you have to take for your actions, to be honest. They're saying what they mean is that you couldn't have fully understood what feeling addicted is going to be like. It's about experience itself, I guess. That's true, but then that's because I've never done drugs in my life, right? That's a choice. And the reason why I've not done drugs in my life is because I can see that it's addictive. And I have friends that, well, not friends, but I have friends of friends that have died from doing drugs. So I don't really see, the net positive of it. That's a choice. As an adult, I've chosen never to do drugs. That's a personal choice that any adult can have. If you choose to do drugs and then you get addicted, who else is to blame? Like, I don't understand. Like, what? You chose to do that. Who else is to blame for that? If not you. I don't really understand that. I'm talking from a medical point of view. You're talking from a philosophical. I'm not really talking from a philosophical point of view, though, because, like, if you know something has, like, we know that cigarettes are addictive, for example. So if you choose to do it, going in knowing that it could be addictive, if you get addicted, who is to blame for that? I don't understand that. Addiction is partially genetic, though. Some people smoke a cigarette once and are immediately addicted. I thankfully don't have that gene, but no friends who do. But once again, like I've been saying earlier, we all know, like, you cannot tell me that we didn't know that cigarettes are addictive. Where some people can get away with it, but ultimately we know that if you smoke a cigarette, there's a chance that you could be addicted to it. So if you then become addicted to it, who is to blame for that's what I'm really asking is, like, who is to blame? Who takes responsibility for that? If I did drugs and then I killed someone, who is to blame? Am I just going to say, people just going to say, well, you're addicted, it's not your fault? Like, I don't understand. Like, where is the personal ownership for your own actions? I don't understand that. Someone said some people have certain predispositions and associations that make them more susceptible to addictive responses, but we're still responsible for our actions and our environments. Okay, some people are saying addiction is not about blame. Addiction is not. No, but we're talking about accountability. That's the conversation we're having. We're talking about taking personal responsibility for your actions, addiction or not. There has to still be a level of, like, personal accountability regardless. And John Galliano understands this, which is why John Galliano, when he was dismissed from Dior, he understood that the only way to come out of this is to, try to overcome my addiction to alcohol. Because if I go back to it and I'm not sober, these are the kinds of things I do when I'm under the influence. So for someone like me, I'm not the kind of person that can drink alcohol and just chill out. I'm going to do crazy things, so I have to stop doing it entirely, essentially. Foxy Cinnamon says, I had addiction to drugs, drinking, gambling in my family. So I experimented when younger, but stopped when I was in an intense university and stopped drinking because not 25 anymore. That's fair enough. It's not your fault, but it's your responsibility to get better and make amends. Agreed. And I agree with this too. It's a disorder, but choices reduce aversion to substance. And this is why I hate a lot of influencers and brands that try making cigarettes and alcohol a cool thing, because kids get addicted and kids aren't to blame, and getting over it is hard. Yeah, definitely. If you're a kid, because obviously I'm talking about adults, not necessarily children, because when we talk about children, it's a bit different, because children, if you're underage, there has to be a level of safeguarding around children, right? That's why, children aren't considered adults in the court of law. They're not convicted like they're adults, because there's an understanding that there's a level of personal responsibility that they can't take when you're underage, because your brain isn't even fully developed yet. So it's very different from being an adult. But yeah, if we're talking about kids, it's a completely different conversation entirely. Completely different conversation. But yes, you need to take responsibility and search for help, because no one can force you to get over addiction. 100%. Initially, it's a choice, but once the person is wrapped up in the addiction, they aren't in their right mind. Agreed. I definitely agree with this too. I think once you're within the addiction, then your actions are partially because of the addiction itself. But my argument is, like, as an adult, certain things are addictive. So, if you decide to partake in those things and then get addicted, it's now your responsibility to, get past that addiction, because it's the same choice that you used that caused that addiction to start in the first place. This is not the same thing. It's not the same thing as you're poor because you choose to be poor. No, it's not the same thing. It's really not the same thing. The factors that it takes to choose not to drink alcohol, to choose not to do drugs, is completely different to the factors that it takes to come out of poverty. Like, to try and compare those two things is like ludicrous, to be very honest with you. Like, that's insane to try and like compare those two things. They're not even remotely comparable, in like not even close. Like, you can literally just choose, I'm not going to drink alcohol. You can choose, I'm never going to do drugs. You can't just wake up and choose, I want to come out of poverty now. Like, they're not the same thing.